only during today's session. We are recording the session, and we'll send that out along with a URL for a free online mobile test automation assessment that is hosted by our partner Utopia. We're hoping that you'll take advantage of that just to give us an idea of where you are with regards to mobile testing and mobile automation, as well as if there's areas where we can help. So that'll come out following the presentation. With me today is Lee Barnes, founder and CEO of Utopia Solutions, and Mike Ostenberg, our senior solutions engineer here with Soasta. Our topic is building a strategy for mobile test automation success. We'd like to get an idea of who we have with us here today, so if you'll just take a minute and fill out this poll. And during that time, we'll basically take this time to talk, if you will, about the concept of where we're going to be going with test automation, and discussing sort of the benefits of looking at it, how you break down the problem into smaller bite-sized chunks, and then work through sort of how to get it implemented and that kind of idea. You'll also see a demo today with Mike of our product, of Soasta's product called Touch Test, which is our mobile functional test automation tool, and get an idea of how that works both in a DevOps scenario as well as in a standalone. So I'm going to sort of skip to some results here. We've got a fairly good mix of people today. Which options best describe your current state of automation? 27% here, no test automation, ad hoc, structured test automation, very large percentage, that's great. We have some legacy automation and legacy and mobile automation there for you, Lee and Mike. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Lee and have him take over from here and run us through the agenda and start into the presentation.
Thanks, Carl, and thank you everyone for joining today. So a quick overview of what we're going to talk about today, or what I'm going to talk about today. First, what is the end goal of mobile test automation, and why do we need a strategy to reach it? Once we understand that, we're going to look at what we need to consider as part of that strategy, and finally, what a finished product in terms of a mobile test automation strategy might look like. So to get started, let's look at the end goal. And really the ultimate goal of mobile test automation implementations is the execution of a single set of test cases across a diverse set of real devices. And the possibility to execute the same test across multiple platforms and devices is really where that huge ROI opportunity lies. However, as I'm sure we're all aware, that same diversity and those same differences between the platforms and devices present some significant challenges, and we'll look into that a little bit today. So while the potential is extremely attractive, if you don't identify and address those challenges as part of a strategy, you're going to have a very difficult time achieving the goals. But before we jump into the strategy components and what that might look like, let's take a quick look at what makes test automation successful in the first place. So to claim success with mobile test automation, it's not enough to just say that I'm executing test cases across a diverse set of devices. To truly be successful, you need to be able to reliably execute the test suite each time you need it. Right? And reliable means you can detect and recover from issues. Your verification is accurate. You don't have false passes or failures. And you can execute that in an unattended fashion. Otherwise, you're really not getting the ROI that you would hope for. Also needs to be maintainable. Maintainable means it has minimum sensitivity to application and test case changes. You can't be spending all your time getting your test to work again every time you have a new application. And ideally, that maintenance is separate from the automation solution itself. Finally, it's scalable. You want to be able to expand your test coverage efficiently, and ideally have those automated test cases created by the people who understand testing, not not dedicated automation engineers. So let's look now at why we might need a strategy. So, but before we look at the individual components, let's look at some of the challenges that we're going to face. I think that will give us a good foundation. Certainly the general test automation challenges still apply. You still need to get the scope right, still need to make automation part of the way you develop and test software versus some separate task that happens at the end. Specific to mobile, as I'm sure you've guessed, platform and device diversity top that list of challenges. But we also have device access. While mobile devices are becoming more powerful all the time, we still can't have a test tool running on the mobile device the way we have come accustomed to with desktop tools. But we still need to be able to interact with that mobile application in a very meaningful way. So we need to be able to access those devices. We also have rapid technology change. What works today might not work when the next mobile OS comes out. We need to be able to understand that and have our strategy take that into account. So after looking at the challenges, I think it's helpful to understand why test automation fails, and it will help us put together a strategy for avoiding some of that. Many efforts are doomed from the start due to organizational issues. Maybe the organization doesn't have realistic expectations. They're saying we can automate 100% of our testing with a simple record and playback approach. Not having the right supporting processes in place is another cause of potential disaster. The biggest one being uncontrollable test data, whether it's traditional test automation or mobile. If you're going to run the same test over and over again and expect the same results each time, a big part of that is controlling the data associated with the test cases. Of course, technical issues can sink in implementation as well, especially true for mobile given the diversity across platforms and the rate of change in the technology. So your tool support can become an issue. I've seen some instances where automation came to an abrupt halt because the new OS version wasn't supported. And one of the reasons we're here with Soasta is because Touch Test has a great track record of supporting new OSs right out of the gate. So let's see what we need to know first before we start putting our strategy together. What things do we need to assess? And the first thing is, are we ready? And I assure you that no children were harmed in the making of this presentation. But I do like to say that automation is a bit like swimming. If you don't have some important prerequisites in place, the results can be disastrous. So we really need to understand how ready we are to undertake test automation. So let's look at the things we need to assess. And it comes down, as these things often do, to people, process, and technology. From a people perspective, we need to understand how are we organized. Where does our testing take place? Is it in a separate center of excellence? Are we agile within the sprints and the agile teams? Organizationally, do we have the support for test automation? And real support, so political, financial support with realistic expectations of what it's going to take to be successful. And of course, do the people have the appropriate experience and expertise to be successful? And if not, how do we get it? From a process perspective, how mature is our testing? Do we have test objectives? Do we understand what we're trying to accomplish? Just from testing in general. What assets do we have from a testing perspective? And how are those going to play into how we can understand what we should automate? Can we make automation part of the way we develop and test software? Again, how are we going to integrate that? That's a very important aspect. And finally, what control do we have over our test environment and data? As I said earlier, one of the biggest causes of issues in test automation is lack of control there. Finally, from a technology perspective, what mobile platforms do we need to support? How are we going to access those devices? What's the technology of the application under test? Is it a mobile website, or is it native apps? Is it a hybrid app? And then how well does our chosen test tool, if we already have one, integrate with that application under test? So once we understand what we have to look at, we actually have to get the information, and typically it comes from the stakeholders, the people that have a stake in test automation actually succeeding and giving back that return on investment. We inspect existing assets. If it's typically testing assets, if it's existing test automation assets, we look to see how that can be extended to mobile. And of course, we look at the target applications to understand their technology and how our tool might be able to support it best. So now that we're going to have an understanding of what we need to take a look at to understand, are we ready? Let's take a look at what a strategy might look like. And it's important to start with a plan, right? The worst thing we can do is start to put together a solution, put together automated tests with really not understanding where we're going and why we're going there. So we talked about this a little bit before, but what operating systems and devices are we going to automate on? What test cases lend themselves to automation? And what non-testing tasks, but are still a part of the activities that we perform every day related to testing, like data setup, environment setup, maybe very tedious verification on the back end, that we might be able to automate as well. What technical challenges do we have? How are we going to interact with those devices? How different is our application across mobile devices and different mobile platforms? How are we going to identify the individual user interface objects within those applications? Finally, from a process perspective, what type of development cycle do we have? How are we going to maintain the test suite that we build as we go through that development cycle? And then finally, from a test execution and analysis perspective, how's automation going to fit into there? And ultimately, that plan can become a more detailed strategy, and we typically look at 5 main components to that. The process in the organization. So from a process and an organizational point of view, do we need to have in place to appropriately support automation? Similar from an environment perspective, what environments are we going to develop and execute our automated and maintain our automated test solution in? What are the technical challenges we have to address, and how are we going to do that? From a resource perspective, certainly hardware, software for executing the test, building the test, but also the people aspect and understanding the expertise and the experience required to make that successful. And of course, really kind of the main underlying foundation, which is the scope and the roadmap. What are we going to automate, and how are we going to do that? Are we going to take the big bang approach and try to automate everything in one discrete project, or are we going to take more of a phased, iterative approach and build out our scope incrementally? So let's take a look now at the next few slides and look at each one of these topics and what ideally we'd like to see from a strategy perspective. So the key organizational components that need to be part of your strategy, first, as I alluded to, political and financial support. Test automation is an investment, and for you need to hang in the game long enough to get a return on that investment. So the expectation of a quick payback is probably is probably not realistic depending on what you're doing. So you need to have the appropriate political and financial support to see it through the process. Very closely related to that, realistic expectations. What am I going to automate realistically? What is it going to cost, and what is my return going to be? We see that in most cases a centralized automation function, at least a centralized, even if it's just virtually centralized in terms of resources, where those skills and experience and technology can be evolved more quickly than if it was dispersed across different projects or teams or business units. From a process perspective, have a real keen focus on what your objectives are for testing, for sure, as well as automation, and then what of those test objectives are you going to cover with automation? Very, very important is integrating your automation process with the way you test and develop software. You don't want to find out when you need test results that your automated test suite is broke because of something that was changed in the application. If you integrate with the development cycle, whether it's agile or waterfall or something in between, understanding what those changes are that are coming down the pipe is very, very important. Looking at the environmental components, ideally we have a dedicated test environment for execution. Understanding certainly that the ideal may not be achievable for many reasons, but the more isolated the automation can be, the more likely that it will not be impacted by other activity in that environment. If you can't dedicate the environment, it's even that more important that you're controlling your test data and not having false failures because someone else had modified some data that you are relying on to be in a certain state for your automated execution. I have controlled code migration there, and I don't necessarily mean that it's manual or it's some waterfall process, but understanding that if you're executing an automated test, even if it's part of continuous integration and part of the build process, it's very intentional about that, and you're not getting surprised by new code in an environment. Finally, from a technical perspective, test tool support. So robust support, meaning the test tool understands how to interact with your application, and it's timely. So with new releases of mobile OSs, we're not waiting for the tool vendor or the tool technology to catch up. And of course, efficient device access, meaning if I want to execute an automated test, I am not hunting around for a device and plugging it into my PC or to something else, and then I can run my test. I should have dedicated access to those devices, independent of where I am, in the building or across the world. Looking at the resource components, again, kind of from a people perspective, what are the roles? Who's going to own automation? Who are the automation engineers? What skills do they require? And how much time? Is this a full-time effort for a team, a full-time effort for one, or is it a part-time effort? And that all is really derived from what your scope is. From hardware, of course, we have the test environment for our application under test, but we also have an environment to develop and execute our automation. And typically, it's a little bit smoother, more efficient if that hardware, physical or virtual, is dedicated. Of course, from a software perspective, you've got your test tool, any supporting utilities to make the testing and test automation more efficient and effective. And finally, again, and I believe, the foundation of the strategy is the scope. We like to look at the supporting tasks for testing as a good first place to start. Typically a lot of low-hanging fruit there. Maybe test data setup, or even set up for other manual testing or other downstream processes. Getting the application itself as well as the environment prepared for testing. Again, automated or manual, it doesn't matter. Those are good tasks that lend themselves well to automation. You may have some very complex, tedious results verification that either you're not doing or you're not doing fully because it is complex and tedious and prone to human error, or you're finding that you're doing it but it's just taking too much time. That lends itself very well. Application selection. Starting with applications that are built on a common technology, because then those technical challenges you're going to run into, when you solve them once, you solve them for across all those applications. Certainly, applications with frequent releases, friendly UIs, work and play well with the tool. Test case selection. Again, these are kind of the things, if you were going to put any type of automation strategy together, you'd be thinking about. Things are frequently tested. High test case to user interface ratio. And by that I mean you've got a page of your app or a section of your app that you can learn how to work with very well with your test tool, and there's a lot of testing that touches that part of the application. So if you can build your automated solution that knows how to work and play with that part of the application and knock off a high percentage of your testing, that's a great place to start. Obviously, predictable results. If your results aren't predictable, it's hard to come up with an automated way to tell you if it's right or wrong. And of course, is it easy or hard to automate? That can mean a lot of different things, but generally, what's the effort for me to be able to automate this area of testing? And then finally, what is the roadmap going to look like? So you've got your strategy and all those 5 components put together, but how are we going to implement that strategy? We certainly have found ourselves that an incremental approach, a phased approach to implementing that strategy typically results in a much more effective and efficient solution in the end. So, for example, we have multiple applications we're going to implement automation for. Based on those criteria we just talked about, we'll get a priority in which order we're going to implement them. And we might start with, first of all, the very key, very important process and organizational improvements that will get us to the minimum state of readiness required for us to start moving ahead. We'll build a base framework. That means different things with different tools, things that are independent of the application we're testing, but we still have to do as part of an automated solution. And then finally, in that first phase, we'll also do some initial coverage on that first application under test to prove that the solution works, to prove that the organizational and process changes that we made are there and they're working. And then in subsequent phases, we'll continue those process and organizational improvements, the lesser priority ones, continue to enhance the framework, expand coverage on that first application, and then maybe do some initial coverage on a second application. And then, as you can see, continue that process as we expand out. If you take the smaller iterative approach, you'll kind of feel how much you can fit into a phase, whether that phase is a sprint or some type of longer development cycle. It allows you to build something that the organization can support and maintain, and kind of feel that point where you're getting to the level that, if I had any more automation, I might not be able to keep it afloat. So just to wrap up, again, understand where you are, understand if you're ready, understand what you need to do to get ready if you're not, and then devise a strategy of those 5 main components, and then put a roadmap in place to implement the strategy. That's all based off kind of your starting point, which is that initial assessment. So right now I'm going to turn it over to Mike Ostenberg, and he's going to talk about Soasta Touch Test, which is the mobile test automation solution. And I think you'll see some of the things that I talked about in play there with Touch Test.
Fantastic. Thank you, Lee. So yeah, as Lee mentioned, we're going to be taking you through Touch Test, which is Soasta's mobile automation platform. And what I'm going to do, I'd like to start with a little bit of the Touch Test architecture. I'm going to walk you through how it works so that you can understand kind of the process here and how it's going to allow enabling the type of testing we was talking about, which is easy test automation done by people that are technical or not technical. You can take manual testers and transition them over towards it. And also working with devices that you might have locally available or that you might have globally available. We don't really care where the devices are. So we have a solution which makes very fast automation by a variety of people in a variety of locations using devices located anywhere as well. So hopefully, are you guys seeing the Touch Test architecture slide there? Okay. So up on the screen, you should see now kind of a little blue rectangle, and that blue rectangle represents the Touch Test server. So an important thing to note about Touch Test is it's an entirely web-based application. You don't need to install anything on your local laptop or client. Your testers just need a browser and a mobile device, and they don't even have to have that mobile device in their hand. This can be a remotely accessed mobile device. So the Touch Test server, it just needs to be able to establish an HTTP connection to the devices to test on them. And that means that you can have globally distributed team testing, working with devices that are maybe in one central location or also distributed. So the way that Touch Test works is you have to start with the application itself. So an IPA for an Apple or iOS application, or an APK for an Android application, or project files for either one of those. And if you have access to that application, we have a small utility called Make App Touch Testable. It's a command line that you would run. You'd give it the name of your IPA or your APK file, and also the login information to the Touch Test server. And what this little command line application is going to do is it's going to take your existing mobile application and create another version of your application that has a small testing library built into it. And so this new version of the application, we call it the testable version of your application, is entirely identical to the original application, but it now has embedded in it a little remote control that allows us to either remotely drive the application just over an HTTP connection, or for us to remotely record user interactions as they use the application. So the first step is to go ahead and run this little utility and make the testable version of your application. So then after you have this testable version of the application, you can install it anywhere that you could install the original application. So if you're testing with physical devices that are in hand, that's great. You can go ahead and use those. If you're using emulators, sure, that's fine too. If you're using devices on a third-party or remote device cloud, great, that's fine too. So anywhere the original app could be installed, you can install this new application and you're ready to begin testing. So how does it work from there? So after you've installed the testable version of the app on a device somewhere or an emulator somewhere, you'll need to connect that device to the Touch Test server. And that's done simply by opening up the browser and typing in the URL for the Touch Test server. What that will do is that will establish an HTTP connection between the server and the device itself. And so now you have communication to your application no matter where this device is located. Then if you open up your browser and you log into the Touch Test server, you'll be able to see that your device is connected here. And if you'd like to record a test case, just hit the record button in your browser. It'll show you all the different devices that are connected to the server, wherever they're located. It'll ask you to select which device you'd like to use and which application you'd like to test with on that device. It'll then go ahead and launch the application for you automatically. And as you use the application, just go ahead and use it as you normally would. What it's going to do is it's going to record every time a user interacts with the application. And over that HTTP connection, it's going to send up to the Touch Test server the details of what the user is doing. And specifically, what it will send is the object that you interacted with and the details of the gesture, whether you're tapping or pinching or swiping, how fast, how long, how many fingers, etc. Full precision of that particular event gets sent up to the Touch Test server. So the Touch Test server is going to have a list of steps that you went through. And that list of steps is the test case that can be played back on this device or other devices. So what you would typically do is you'll record a whole suite of different test cases, and all of these will be stored on the Touch Test server. Then when you're ready to test and confirm that that application works on different devices, different device models and types, and different versions of the operating system, you can connect all of those different devices to the Touch Test server in the same fashion. Just over an HTTP connection, open the browser and connect to the Touch Test server. That'll establish this HTTP connection, whether the devices are owned by you, owned by a third party, physical or emulated devices. We can go ahead and run through those steps on the application so that you can confirm that the application works. So what the touch test server will do is go ahead and play back each of those steps. A step at a time, it'll find the appropriate object, it'll perform the gesture on the object, and it'll go ahead and confirm if you got the correct response from that. And so important point to note is this is all object-based record and replay. So if you recorded a tap on a login button on an iPhone and you play it back on an iPad or an iPad mini, an iOS 6 or 7 or 8, it doesn't really matter to us. We're going to find the button with perhaps the text of login, and then no matter where it's located, we'll perform that gesture on it. So it makes for a great replay across all those different flavors of devices and operating systems. So that's how touch test works, and typically you'll have several of these tests stored and kept in a test suite, which we call a composition, and you can replay at any time and actually automate through the testing process. So let's talk a little bit about that. Now that you have these test suites that you'd like to run on a regular basis perhaps, how do you automate that? How do you make sure that that testing occurs without you having to be there hitting the button? Well, we have within TouchTest developed an integration into CI systems, a plugin for Jenkins, or using a command line interface for other CI tools. So if you have a build process, which many do, where you have your developers working in a certain IDE, like Eclipse or Xcode, and then perhaps checking into a version control system on a periodic basis, then they'll often have a continuous integration system that takes those latest versions of the code, compiles them as the latest build of an application on a regular basis. When we work with Jenkins, we have a plugin specifically developed for Jenkins, or other CI systems can use the command line interface to kick off the testing process. From here, the Jenkins command line plugin allows you to specifically take the existing application that maybe you're already building and make that testable version of the application. So that process of taking a library and putting it into the app, you can either do it from the command shell, but you can also have Jenkins do it as part of an automated process. From there, after you have that testable version of the application, we also include in the plugin for Jenkins the capability to automatically deploy it onto the devices you need to test on. So it will actually install the new version of the application on these devices so that you can test the latest version as soon as it's available. From there, it will go ahead and kick off the test set, run through all those different test cases on all those different devices, and report back all the information about the pass-fail status of the test that it went through. Now, to Jenkins, we report back kind of an XML summary of it, but it also has embedded in that a link to the detailed information with screenshots, view hierarchies, object properties, which is always going to be stored on the touch test server. And that will be available to you directly in Jenkins from an iframe there. So with this, you're able to achieve full testing automation from TouchTest, working with Jenkins or other CI systems. So that's what we're going to show. I'm going to hop into the product here in just a second. Carl, are there any questions you know so far?
There was one question here. Is this compatible with app deployment services such as TestFlight or Hockey?
Yes, absolutely. So as I mentioned before, you can take this testable version of the app, and it's as far as those services are concerned, it's another IPA or APK, and you can go ahead and distribute however you normally distribute. So whether you want to use our automated, deploy kind of over the cable, or if you want to use one of those automated deployment over the air, any of those will work as well. So great. Let's go ahead and hop into TouchTest. I've got now, hopefully you're seeing on the screen, a browser. I'm logged into a TouchTest server. Important to note that I'm currently located in Mountain View, California, on the west coast of the United States. This TouchTest server, this wonderfully named mike.soasta.com TouchTest server, is located on the east coast of the United States. And I have on the desk next to me an iPad, which I'm going to go ahead and share the display of, also with me here in Mountain View on the west coast of the United States. Okay, so you should be seeing it just disappeared. I'll try that again. Okay, you guys seeing the iPad? Okay, sometimes they don't come through the meeting share. So this iPad that you're seeing on the screen here, this is an iPad that's sitting on the desk next to me here. And I've already installed on this iPad a few testable applications. So I've taken a few applications, embedded our library in them so that we can go ahead and test with them. From here, if I want to create test cases, I need to start by taking this iPad and connecting it to the mike.soasta.com server. And I'll do that just by opening up a browser here. So I'm going to tap on Safari. It's going to open up Safari. I've actually bookmarked that page, so let me go ahead and pull up that page. There we go. So now this is called the TouchTest Agent page. It's basically holding an HTTP connection between my device and wherever that TouchTest server is located. So I'm now ready over that HTTP connection to send instructions down to the device. So let's go ahead and create a test case. To create a test case, I'll go on the upper left here, and I'm going to do New Test Clip. And from the test clip options, you'll see there's two ways we can create test cases. In the top, there's the options to record user interaction. And then in the bottom, Test Clip Builder, this allows you to just drag and drop previous user interactions that you've recorded. So if you've already recorded the process to log into the application or fill out the form or fill out shipping information, all of those can be stored as reusable clips down here. And just in the browser interface, you can drag and drop those test cases to create. We're going to show you today how to do the recording portion of it, so let's go ahead and do that. From this record dropdown, you'll see I've got a few different options available. One thing that's important to note about touch test is this top option, Record HTTP. This allows you to record just the HTTP requests that your application is making. And the reason you do that is if you want to independently test the services, the calls that your application makes to the back-end servers, you can do that. These bottom two options here, Record Mobile App, this allows you to record user interactions with a native mobile application or a hybrid application. And Record Mobile Web allows you to pop open a browser on your mobile device and record navigating web pages. So pick the type of recording you'd like to do. In this case, I've got a native application, so I'm going to record mobile app. And what's going to come up here is a screen that shows me all the different devices that have connected to the touch test server. Now, certainly over time, you can see all these different devices that have connected. And in the right-hand column, you can see the ones that are currently connected. And all that means is they have a web page open to the Soasta touch test server, and basically are maintaining an active HTTP connection. So I can see that my iPad here is currently connected. Down below here, a list of applications that are on that. So I'll go ahead and pick an application. I'll choose this Southwest application. And when I hit the record button, what's going to happen is it's going to launch the application. Over that HTTP connection, it's going to send down to the device, wherever it's at, telling it, please launch the Southwest application. And then as we use the application, it will record every one of the interactions we have with the application. Let me do that, and I'm going to tap record. I'll make that iPad a little bigger. It's going to launch into the application here for us. And from here, again, you can take your manual testers and just have them work through the test cases that they're currently doing. I'll go ahead and tap on continue as guest here. Maybe I'll check on flight status. And what you're going to see happening is every time I interact with the application, on the left-hand side here, it's giving you a little summary of what that particular interaction is. These are the steps that we can replay on this or other devices. So I'll go ahead and tap that I want to check flights from Atlanta to Austin here. And then I'll look up flights here. So as I've gone through about 7 different steps so far, every one of these steps has been recorded in the left here. Let's take a look at the details of what we're recording here. When I open this up, you'll see that for this tap operation, it's recorded as Locator. What a locator is identifying the object that we're going to find and go ahead and perform that operation on. In this case, you can see it's a tap operation. So when the playback happens, it's going to go ahead and look through the user interface to wherever that button that has a text of lookup is. This locator, by the way, there's a variety of properties available. We will automatically pick what we think is the appropriate property, whether it's the name or the text or the ID. You can either put on a locator ID that's independent of anything in the user interface. We call it a touch test ID so that you can identify an object. You can also use accessibility label, placeholder, class name. So we'll automatically pick one of those, but if you'd like to change that or choose a different one that you think is more appropriate, it's very easy to modify the test case here and go ahead and put in other locators, check using other properties, or use full XPath where you can use a combination of properties. So that's the first part. This basically just defines, hey, what button am I going to click on? And then this little array of values here, this is the details of the gesture that we did. Now, it's a simple tap operation, this step, but you can see we've recorded quite a few series of numbers here. If you have a more complicated gesture, such as signing your name, we'll actually have a very long array of numbers, and we'll play that back at full precision. We'll have the same speed, velocity, and full path that you follow for signing your name. So this can get to be very large, but essentially this is going to be the details of the gesture. Now, since people can't usually look at arrays of numbers and understand what the heck that was, we actually summarize it down here. This array of numbers here corresponds to tapping with a single finger with one tap, not a double tap. No, that's one tap with a single finger, and for a duration of 105 milliseconds. And this last item here, this is saying that, hey, after we find that lookup button, we're going to go ahead and start our gesture at 47 pixels over and 16 pixels down. And we'll go ahead and, again, no matter where that button is on the display, we'll find it, and we'll start the gesture within the button at the same location. So that's how we record each of these steps. This will go ahead and play back across different operating systems, across different versions of the application, different device types, because we're basically doing object-based record and playback. Now, when we want to add validations to the automation here, how do we do that? as an example on this page here, after we've checked on flights, we might want to check to make sure that the right flight numbers are there. So to add validations in touch stats, you just have to mouse over the particular step you'd like, and a series of icons pops up here. The item with the green check mark, that indicates that you can add a validation. These other 4 check marks, this is to add a wait condition. You can actually say, hey, before you do that operation, before you try to tap or swipe, wait until something occurs. Maybe until the progress bar goes away, or the spinner is gone, or that yellow dot turns green. Whatever that property is, you can tell the automation to sort of wait. The reason you might want to do this is the automation can go fairly quickly, quicker typically than a manual tester can go, and sometimes quicker than the application can respond. So as soon as the screen appears, we'll tap on the button and go ahead and move to the next step. But sometimes the application isn't ready. So you can actually tell the automation, hey, hold on a bit when you get to that page. Wait until that little progress bar says, hey, done or ready or something along those lines. Similarly, beyond this wait before, there's a wait after. And what this says is after I perform the operation, but before I do my validation steps, I'd like to wait for something to occur. So as an example, if you tap the login button, but you want to check the account number, you want to wait until that page comes up that says welcome, that you're logged in. So you might put a wait condition here after login, wait until the page comes up, and then look for the account number. And then these two here are output and capture values. So you can capture any of the values of any of the objects out of the application, perhaps to plug in later down the stream. If you have an account number or a confirmation number, you can grab it from the application and use it in a future step. In our case, we're going to add a validation by hitting this green check mark. So I hit the green check mark here. It's added a verification step down below here. And you can see from the drop-down that we have a lot of pre-built verifications. Again, the point here is that we don't want you to have to create validations or be technical. You just have to say what type of validation. And essentially it's a long list, but it's check any property of any object in the user interface, or check to see if it's there, the number of items. So anything you might want to check as a manual tester, you can check automatically with this. In our case, if we wanted to check to make sure that flight number was there, that might be verify element present. So for the verify element present, the argument that we need is the properties of the object that we want to look for, check to make sure it's in the user interface. So I can type it in here. Maybe I know the accessibility label of this particular object or the placeholder. I can go ahead and type those values in here equals, I can go ahead and type those in here. If I don't know the properties though, and we by the way don't expect people to know the properties of all the objects in their user interface, you'll see that whenever I have this button for the locator, I've also got a button off to the right here. And this button off to the right here is called the touch locator. What the touch locator allows you to do is just point to the object that you're interested in, and it'll go ahead and give you a list of locators that you can use, and pick the one that looks most appropriate. So I'm going to tap this touch locator now. You'll see that the application has sort of grayed out there. Let me pull it over so you can see the whole thing. And I'm going to go ahead and reach over to my iPad and touch on different items in the iPad. And you'll see it's kind of highlighting those items in the iPad. What we have here is a list of different locators that could be used for this. And this is an exhaustive list, by the way. There's other locators that might be appropriate, so you can pick whatever you'd like to use here. But these are some common ones that you might use. So in our case, since we wanted to check to make sure that flight was there, I'll go ahead and tap on the flight. Now that it's highlighting the item I'm interested in, these are the locators I can use for that object. And if this is the object I want, I'll just hit this blue button, and it'll go ahead and fill in this locator field for me. So I'm going to do that now. I'm tapping the blue arrow. It's now filled in the locator. And from the drop-down in this locator text, get that little arrow there, from the drop-down in the locator text, you can see it's given us a variety of different locators that we can use. Again, this is just a short list. If you have other locators you want to use or think something else is more appropriate, you can do that. In this case, typically simpler is better, so I'm just going to go ahead and use this text locator of 270. So we've created a test case here that checks to make sure that flight 270. We can also do validations based upon screenshots. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the green validation again. It's pulled up a verify step. I'm going to, in this case, pull down to another verification type called verify screenshot. And with the screenshot verification, you can take a snapshot of either the full page of the application or a subsection, a particular object, or an arbitrary rectangle in the application. And what happens when we play back the test case is it's going to get to this particular step. It's going to take another screenshot, and it's going to compare it to this screenshot here. And if they're different, it's going to fail the test step. If they're the same, it's going to say, yeah, that's what you're looking for. We got it. You might notice, however, that there is a date on this. So if I play back my test case tomorrow, the date will be different. So the screenshot will be different. It will have a different date on there. So for that, we also allow you to put in here a tolerance. And this tolerance allows you to say, okay, well, maybe if the screenshots are mostly the same, but 2% of the items are different, 2% of the pixels are different, that'll be okay. That's close enough. So you can put in a tolerance here. That'll allow for some variation in the screenshot because, there will be items that change, but by and large, you would think it should look like this. This is the page we're looking for. So that's putting in validation. So we've got a test case now. We've logged into the application. We've checked on a few flights. We've pulled up flight numbers. We want to check to make sure it works. How do we do that? I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording here of the test case here, and we're going to save it here. I'll just save this as a Utopia. My test case, I'll call it Utopia. So I've got a test case. If I want to play back my test case, I just go up here and I do play and test composition. And what it's going to do is it's going to go ahead and play back the test case. It might, around the second step, we might have an issue where the automation has gone a little faster than the application, and I'll show you how to modify the test case. Hopefully we'll hit that. But as it's playing back here, you'll notice a couple things. First of all, it's got a little blue dot. You'll see that appear on the page, and also a little blue text box. What the blue dot is showing you where we're tapping or swiping or pinching, and what the blue text box is describing what we're looking for. So if it stops at a position sometime and you're wondering what it's doing, just look in that text box. It'll tell you the object that it's looking for. On the left-hand side in the browser, as it just went through all those test steps here, you can click on any one of those test steps and see exactly what was going on at that particular time. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up the App Action 2 test step. And in the bottom here, you'll see that we've stored here information about that particular step. You can see that we had a verify element present, that we had a screenshot. This is what the app looks like at that particular step in the application here. And so you've got visual verification. Of course, when the testing occurs at 2 in the morning, you don't want to be there. You want to come in the next morning. If there was an error, you want to see the screenshot. You can actually look at these right here in the browser. We also capture items such as an XML hierarchy, which is all the properties of the interfaces we've gone through here. So in just a few minutes here, we've created a test case that will log into the application, look up a flight, check to make sure we've got the right flight number, and we've played it back on our device here. What about, though, when we want to go ahead and use additional devices? Certainly just on this one type and model of iPad with this one version of operating system is great, but there's lots of operating systems and lots of devices out there. So how do I take this test case and play it back across all those other device types? Well, I'm going to go up to the edit step of my test composition that I have here. And what we'll see here is I've got this one track where I'm playing the Utopia test case that we just created on my iPad 4. If I want to play back on other devices, all I have to do here is go ahead and duplicate this. So if I have 3 other devices, I'm going to duplicate this 3 times. And for this, you'll see we've got 3 additional tracks here. For these, I just have to pull up the other devices I want to use. And these devices have to connect to the touch test server. So I have in my hand, and I'm going to show on the display here, another device. I've got my iPhone. There we go. That's another physical iPhone. It's in my hand here in Mountain View, California, sitting next to me. I'm going to take this device and I'm going to connect it to the touch test server just as I did the previous one. I'll tap on the browser here. I've got it bookmarked to go ahead and connect it to that agent. And so we've got 2 devices here in Mountain View, California. We also have access to a remote test cloud. So if there are devices that you don't have locally, that you don't own locally, but you would like to be able to remotely access devices, whether they're on our cloud or if you have other cloud offerings, you can go ahead and pull those up. So in this case, maybe I want to use an iPhone 6 Plus. So I'm going to pull this up here. We're going to use this iPhone 6 Plus. This remote device offering basically gives you access to devices. There's a farm of devices located. I think these ones are actually in Japan. But now here's an iPhone 6 Plus. If I want to also test on maybe, what else have we got here? I'll do an iPad mini. Go ahead and pull one of those up too. And so now I've got 2 more devices, an iPad mini, and I think they're both on the agent page. Yep, so they're both on the agent page. So I'm going to go ahead and select over here on my test case. Yes, I'd like to run on the iPhone 6. Yes, I'd like to also run on the iPad mini. Yes, I'd also like to run on the iPhone 6 Plus. And we can even name these so that it's clear. I'll call it iPad 4. This is iPhone 6. This is iPad mini. And this is the iPhone 6 Plus. Okay, so kind of a wide range of different device form factors in different devices. I'm going to go ahead and save this test case as Utopia comp. And we're ready to go ahead and play this. So let me go ahead and hit the play button. And what you're going to see happen is across all these wider range of devices, I'll make that a little smaller so that we can see the test case as it runs. It's going to play in parallel across all these different devices. Pull up those. And these devices, again, are located in, 2 of them are on the west coast of the United States. The touch test server is on the east coast of the United States. These devices are in Japan. You can go ahead and use devices in any location around the world. Again, physical devices or emulated devices, your devices or cloud devices. Pick the different devices you want to play on, and it'll go ahead and play those. As it's playing back, let's take a look at the type of information we're getting. We're getting not only the pass-fail status of every step in the test case here, but you're also seeing we're picking up things like the CPU and the memory and battery, and that'll populate here in just a second, so that you can see if your test case is essentially maxing out the device. Different devices certainly have different memory characteristics, different CPU capacity. Fancy apps might be a little bit heavy for the older phones or operating systems, but you have full visibility into the CPU, memory, and battery of each of the tests as it runs here. So we've created a test case. Now you can see that a couple of these, they have a checkbox here indicating that there was a failure on a particular test step or an item here. If you want to pull that up here, you can actually go in and follow that red X to find out if there was a failure or an error message. So we're going to do that right now. I'm going down to this iPhone 6. We'll see at App Action 3 what's happened there. And it looks like it was looking for a Tony Custom button that didn't come up here. We didn't actually have those flights being listed here. So in this case, what's happened is we need to put in a wait condition. And so if you need to modify a test case after you've created it, very easy to go back into the test case at any time and modify it. In this particular case, the app action here for text equals flight status, we actually passed that too quickly. So I'm going to put on a wait condition before we do that. And I'm going to say, let's go ahead and wait for either you can wait for the property of an element to hit, like the green or the yellow dot goes green. In this case, I'll just do a hard-coded wait for time delay. Oops. Hard-coded wait for time delay. And this allows us to kind of slow down the automation, saying, hey, you tap that really quickly. Why don't you give the application a little bit of time after the splash page goes away before you tap it? So I've updated the test case here. We can go ahead and replay this here. Let me check to make sure my remote devices are up. Just got to get the browser back up there. Okay, so let's replay this test case. And it'll go ahead and play through all the different test cases. So now we've done a couple runs of this test case on multiple devices. Wrong window. And again, you'll see kind of local devices, the remote devices playing through here. In a second, we're going to go ahead and run this from Jenkins as well, so that you're going to see this entire process where we've just in a few minutes created a test case that's playing across multiple devices around the world, that you can also have that automated directly from Jenkins. In this case, you can see we got pretty far here. We're down to App Action 7. When I look at that one, it says validation screenshot failed. And this is to be expected. We took a screenshot while I was on an iPad. We played it back on an iPhone, and of course the screenshots are different. iPad and iPhone will have different screen captures. So that is something that if you take screen captures, you'll have to put in an if statement saying if iPad used this screen capture, if iPhone used the other one. So now that we have our test case, let's go ahead and save this composition. Again, we've got that TTS composition. And I'm going to move over to this other tab here, which is Jenkins. And Jenkins, I'm sure most of you are aware, is a continuous integration server. It allows you to automate the building of applications. But we also have within Jenkins a Soasta plugin. If you go to the plugin manager in Jenkins, you'll see it listed there. Just click on the install button, and it'll install in about 30 seconds. From there, we can go ahead and run test cases from Jenkins. So I'm going to create a new job in Jenkins here. And when I create a new job, down here there's a section for build steps, where we can put in a series of steps to complete with the job. Typically, these will be build application, pull out a version control, etc. But now that we've got our Soasta plugin installed, you can see we've added a few more build steps here. One of them is this make app touch testable. What you can do is you can actually just give it the name of an IPA file. And it'll go ahead and take that file and make it a testable application. So that first step that we talked about, take an IPA or an APK and make it testable, you can just give it the name here, and we'll go ahead and do this with the Jenkins plugin. If you don't want to use the Jenkins plugin, all you have to do is run it from the command line. The next item you can do is you can go ahead and install iOS app on device. This will take that testable application and automatically push it onto all these different devices that we're looking at. Then beyond that, if you want to go ahead and play that composition, which is play that test case across all those different devices, go ahead and use this play composition. From play composition, you just have to select the touch test server you want to use and give the name of the composition you want to use, play. I'll go ahead and check the name. I just saved that composition. What did I save it as? There we go, Utopia Conf. Put in the name here, Utopia Conf. And now from Jenkins, we're going to go ahead and run that job. And let me check to make sure that all my devices are ready. They're all on the agent page, ready to roll. I'm going to go ahead and run the job now. I'll just hit build now. And what's different this time is we're running the composition the same as we did before. We're running across all those different devices the same as we did before. I've just initiated it from Jenkins though. So this Jenkins job can actually be triggered by the building of the latest version of your application. So every time the application builds, you can have it run this test case, or you could even say, well, I might have my unit testing being done through Jenkins as well. Now let's wait until after the unit testing is done, and then I'll go ahead and run the full UI level testing here. So whatever option you choose, Jenkins Automation now gives you that capability to trigger based upon events or even just on a regular schedule so that you don't have to be in attendance for the testing itself. Now when it runs these test cases, we'll see in just a bit, it's going to report back into Jenkins the status of everything that's happened here, but also keep the full details, all the screenshots directly on the touch test server and give you an iframe in Jenkins so that you can look at all those details directly from within Jenkins. So we've almost finished our test cases here. It's running across all the devices. So we're going to take a look at the build job in Jenkins. It'll have, again, failures on those 3 devices where the screenshots were different because it's a completely different form of the device. But we'll take a look to see what kind of information we get here in Jenkins. It's writing back the results now. So here's our job. I'm going to go ahead and click on that build history. First, we can see the test result here, and we can see every one of the validations that failed. We're running on these different devices, different tracks here. You can see every screenshot that's failed. Now, looking at this, you see we failed 3 out of the 4 of the runs of the application. If I want more details on that, I just click on this link down here, and this is taking us directly into that full step-by-step replay with all the screenshots. This is being served as an iframe from the touch test server, but full visibility into what's going on there. So I can click on any step here and see what's going on. One of the other things you can do is if you're wondering, hey, what's up with this build? I thought the previous ones were doing okay. Well, I'm going to go ahead and click on this plus button and bring up another dashboard. And the dashboard I'm going to bring up here is something called the test suite dashboard. This will give you the history of not only this run, but the previous runs you've done for this test suite so that you can compare and see how it's doing. Up at the top, we give kind of a quick summary in terms of how many compositions you ran, how many clips and validations there were. And in this case, we've only run our test composition a few times, but you'll see the history of the different results. And from here, you can see that one that we recorded on passed all 3 runs, and the other 3 items, they failed all of them. And if you want to drill into that, you can actually see verified screenshots. They all failed on the verified screenshot. So you've got a history of all the runs being presented to you directly here in Jenkins, but also the history is being served from the touch test server where you can also go to view those results. So that's essentially what we wanted to show. Again, kind of to Lee's point, we've got a tool that hopefully works well with a migration to automation or with kind of working with any automation framework that you might have, because we've got an easy way to create test cases and then run them on a variety of different devices. You can pull together teams that are distributed, work with devices that are distributed or locally owned, and then you can capture the results and view the results of local test runs, previous test runs, directly either in Jenkins or from the touch test server itself. So that's kind of it. Is there, let's maybe throw it over for any last questions if you want to go into the questions part. I'll turn it back to you, Carl, for a final wrap-up.
Mike, do I just stop sharing here?
Yeah.
Oops. Thank you very much, Mike. We're getting close here on our time. A couple things that I wanted to be able to give people the option of seeing here is we have built 2 new packages available for customers that if they want to know how to get started in this process, is an Agile Team Kit process and the Regression Suite Starter Kit there. You can get an idea that it's a 30-day engagement that will come in and we'll get it set up as you've just seen Mike showing, and we'll build you 10 customized user clips with or user stories built out of reusable clips that Mike referred to earlier. So it's just a way of kicking this off and getting it rolling for you to get going. I have a little poll here just from a more information kind of thing. If you can go ahead and click on things that you would be interested in. I'll just talk about these very quickly so that we want to basically help you with your automation thing if we can. One of the tools that we have available to you, and I mentioned it in the beginning of this, is that we'll send out an email with regards to this URL, but Utopia has built an online mobile assessment tool that will help you talk through or walk through your custom scenario, and this will give you some feedback on what types of things you'll need to do the automation well. It comes along with an hour of Utopia's time to be able to talk to you about it and just get more information and help guide you that way. So I'd love to hear people's feedback on that and people that might be interested in that. Again, the Agile Team Kit and the Regression Suite. We also have, you saw the device cloud that was available there. We can get you free hours just to try it. And then we've got our own touch test products and the white paper available there for folks. I'm going to skip the results and people are responding here. The last piece basically that I wanted to make sure that you have, we'll put this in the email as well that goes out, and that is just contact information for Lee and for Mike with regards to being able to contact them with questions and things going forward. So we're just a minute over our time here. If you've got any questions, we'll hang on for a couple minutes, but this ends our presentation for the day. We hope that this has been helpful for you, and certainly if you have any questions, either contact us via email or ask us right here in chat, and we'll try to get everything answered. So again, thank you for your time today, and good luck with your automation project.